My name is Georgie Roberts and I'm with the South African Equestrian Federation here at the FEI General Assembly 2022 for the first time in South Africa. And it's been a particularly exciting General Assembly because there has been the introduction of the Equine Ethics and Wellbeing Commission. And this is Professor Natalie Waran from New Zealand, who is here to tell us a little bit about it. Nat, so tell us, thank you for joining me first of all. I was so excited to meet you. You spoke so well. The presentation was incredible. Would you mind telling everyone a little bit about how this came to be?
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me to come and talk, and it is wonderful to be here in South Africa. What's actually happened, I suppose, is that there has been for some time some concerns about the public perception of equine sports generally, and certainly worries about how concerned they might be about the use of the horse in sport. And so the FEI asked a number of us, they commissioned us to start to develop an approach to address issues of what's called social license to operate, but mainly really trying to look at what the particular welfare concerns might be of the public in relation to the use of the horse in sports, and what sorts of things needed to be done to address those things, just to make sure that the public remained confident and trusting that horse welfare is paramount, and that everything that's being done with the horse is really is not going to negatively affect its welfare. So that was what the commission was about.
So from what I'm understanding, there are two elements to it. The first is how the public is perceiving us, but you also spoke about a very real welfare, I don't want to say crisis, it's not the word, but concerns. Yeah. There are these two concerns. How do you address each of those and then again together? Yeah,
it's an interesting one, because social license is about perception. But obviously FEI bases its decision making on evidence as much as possible, and we're researchers, scientists, so we want to make sure that when we're making recommendations to the FEI about things that could be done, things that need to change, that we do that from an evidence-based point of view. Obviously bearing in mind that we need to know what the specific concerns are of the public, but also of equestrian stakeholders generally. Mm. And so we carried out 2 surveys, and we're really grateful to the many people who spent their time filling in these surveys. We had a public survey that went out to 14 different countries and was translated for those countries. And then we also put out a survey that went to FEI stakeholders through the FEI network, but also to equestrians generally through a kind of snowball system, I suppose, where people kind of copied and pasted and shared links. And we were amazed that within about a 3-week period, we had almost 28,000 responses to Wonderful. The equestrian survey.
Obviously, people feel very passionately about this.
They certainly do, and the questions were mostly formulated as, tell us, do you agree with this or this? But we did provide space for a free text answer, and we were amazed at the effort that people put into answering that question. They wrote us a lot of very constructive comments.
What are some of the concerns that people feel?
I think the main concern that came out of the public survey was that they were worried about the horse's welfare and the horse's safety. From the equestrians, they obviously know a little bit more about horse involvement in sport, and they were a bit more specific about the things that they were concerned about. And I think we ended up being able to group concerns into about 37 different areas, which when we sort of clustered those, came up with sort of themes that we could work with, that broke down to 6 priority areas, we're calling them. And those areas related to things to do with, not surprisingly, tack and equipment, but also training. But the main concern that most equestrians had was to do with what we're calling the other 23 hours. So what happens to the horse when it's not in the competition arena? What happens to it when it's at home? When it's not in training? How does it live?
Yeah. And I think it's something I always say to people in South Africa. Our grooms are very different, but equally important demographic to, I think, internationally. And those are the people who are spending the majority of the time with the horse, who know the horse really well. And so it's interesting to see that trickle out. I was very fascinated in your talk to discover that when the public looks at equestrian sport, they don't classify as dressage, bush racing, rodeo, and people were pushing you on that a little bit and saying, but we don't do that, they do that, and it's not an us and a they situation. You were saying that equestrians are lumped together, so therefore horse welfare is all of our mandates.
It is. I mean, the public, obviously, people who are equestrians, who are equestrian stakeholders, they know that there are differences. But for the public,
and we defend those differences very violently.
We're very emotional about our differences. But the public, they generally speaking see a horse, and whether it's racing or jumping or dancing or whatever else, it's a horse and it has a rider or a driver behind it, and it's performing, it's doing something. And whilst we might like to think that the horse is having a great time, most of the public that we gained responses from were not convinced that horses enjoyed being used for those purposes.
I think, and I might be mistaken because it was your survey, but I think almost as much as 50% of equestrians were not convinced in the survey that the question was, do horses enjoy their job? Yeah. And I think we were evenly divided on...
Yes, probably a little bit more of the public said no, they didn't think that they enjoyed what they did.
But even for equestrians, for 50% of equestrians, yeah. And that's a hard question for us all to ask ourselves. So I'm sure, are you experiencing a little bit of friction on the introduction of the committee?
Absolutely not. I think most of the people who we've talked to have been really, really positive about it. And we got a great response in presenting. It was quite nerve-wracking because obviously we had a very short time to do a lot of work, and it's a big audience with many different countries being represented here. But on the whole, I think the presentation went well, and even though there was a lot of data to present, it was understood, and I think everybody stood up and said, absolutely, we want to do the best thing for horses.
That's the feeling.
That's why they're positive.
Is that people are just saying, let's be better together, and I think it's such a wonderful attitude. You yourself are an equine, I don't want to say behaviorist, you're a welfare scientist.
Yeah.
And you said you're embarking on an upcoming study.
Yes, so a number of us have been working in this area for quite a long time, and certainly my field is equine welfare and equitation science. So my particular interest is in trying to understand what's going on in the horse's mind, because we talk about welfare or quality of life or well-being, but we're talking about that very much from us judging things, and we do the best.
In a beautiful stable.
Yes,
we must be happy.
Exactly, and that's actually one of the problems. Is our perception is obviously because we think we're doing the right thing, because obviously we enjoy being around the horse, so we would like to think they enjoy being around us.
I'm actively loving you, and the horses just want to go for a walk.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to persuade people because they love their horses so much that actually the horse doesn't have a very strong voice in this relationship that we have. And obviously, it's very rare that you would get on a horse and you would ride it to the end of the drive or the road, and you would say to the horse, right, well, do you want to go left, do you want to go right, or do you just want to go back to the stables today, or do you want to go out and paddock with your friends? And then let them do that, because that's not the job that we expect of them. So the reality is that we're in the controlling seat, and we have responsibilities as a result of that. And so what we really want to see is, a really strong commitment to the horse and recognizing it's its own species, it has its own way of viewing the world, its quality of life, it is to do with its emotional experience. And that emotional experience can be positive and negative. And a lot of that relies hugely on the interaction they have with their person or their people, the experiences that they have in their daily life and throughout their life. And then obviously what happens in the competition sort of space.
Well, I mean, I'm sure if we're creating a happier athlete, which is the Two Hearts campaign centered heavily on that, we all perform better when we're happy and when we're in a better mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think, welfare is, in days past when we talked about welfare, we tended to focus a lot more on the physical health of the animal. But
That's a great differentiation.
Yeah, but now, I mean, you think about human health, it's gone beyond worrying about disease. Obviously, that's very important, but it's far more holistic. It's much more about...
We're up the hierarchy of needs now.
Yeah, I mean, we're into really thinking about healthy mind, being able to have a social, a good social experience, being able to have your behavioural needs met. And horses have behavioural needs. I mean, they need to forage, they need friends, they need some freedom to be able to do the things that horses do.
And those are small things we could do that would really impact the quality of life that they have.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I understand, you were saying that the EWB will look into things and then make recommendations to the FEI committee.
Yes.
And then it's up to the FEI committee to what? What's the next process? Do they pass it out to the national federations for feedback?
Yes, so I think at the moment the FEI has a very strong governance structure, and we've seen that today with lots of voting going on about various different rule changes and so on. And so there are things that when we make recommendations that the FEI board will be able to approve straight away, because they're things that are within their ability to do. But there's quite a lot of things that might be recommended that will need to go through the structure that the FEI has for making decisions. There's a lot of federations that make up the FEI, and whilst it might seem fairly straightforward to make a rule change,
no, of course,
it does have to be something that's owned by the FEI and obviously able to be actioned by the federations.
Beyond the rule change, I think something I really loved, and this is when you speak about the positive response from people, was I think it was the president of the French Federation who said, he spoke on behalf, and he said, we would really like to have access to your report, regardless of whether the FEI approves it or not, just so we can make better choices. And I thought that really spoke to them, saying like they don't want the buck just to stop with the committee. People want to be able to make these positive changes that you suggest.
I mean, that's the positive angle here really, is that the Commission has a short lifespan at the moment. I mean, it's, we're here to do a job, to set the course, to provide some structure, to provide advice and recommendations. And then, of course, this has to be owned by the equestrian stakeholders, the federations,
by the riders,
the grooms, everybody. Everybody has a responsibility, obviously, for ensuring the highest standards of welfare for horses right the way through their life, not just when we see them doing amazing things in the competition sort of space, but right the way from the moment that they're born to the moment that they unfortunately have to leave this earth. And if we can I think really start to think about how we use the best knowledge that we have, because that changes all the time, how we respond actively and openly to criticism, that we recognise that people don't always understand what we do and why we do it, but sometimes we don't actually understand as equestrians what it looks like from the outside. And I have to be honest, sometimes there have been practices that have been there for a long time that have become very normalised, that do need to be questioned because they might not be in the best interest of the horse. And at the end of the day, it is a privilege to be able to sit on a horse or drive a horse or have a friend of a horse or use them in a leisure activity. And that privilege comes with responsibilities.
I love that. One of the recommendations, for example, that you have made, Dressage People Calm Down, was that you just wanted to look at the mandatory use of the double bridle in the Grand Prix. And this is one of the examples, is your recommendation was that the snaffle should also be allowed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it was causing, but I mean, that's not necessarily taking away the double bridle from the Grand Prix. It's just that this is the only sport, you said, that has a mandatory use of a piece of pretty strong equipment.
Yes, I mean, what we were tasked with is, we were coming up with recommendations that we thought could be things that could be done fairly swiftly, and that would I suppose, would respond to some of the concerns that we were seeing within these surveys that we've carried out. But also, I mean, part of the way that we make recommendations is looking at other surveys that have been carried out, other areas where there's been quite a bit of debate and concern, but also what the research is telling us. And, the horse's mouth is a pretty delicate, part of its anatomy.
You said there's been quite a lot of studies now done on damage that they're finding. Okay.
I mean, it's not just damage to do with double bridles.
No.
But, certainly, the response that we were getting from the equestrians and the public that we surveyed was that they had concerns about what they termed harsh or overbitted, or where there's more than one bit in a horse's mouth. And when you start to speak to some of the expert groups who know about horses' mouths, they told us that the horse's mouth it's quite small. There's not a lot of room in there just for its tongue and its gums, its teeth. And then you put some bits in its mouth as well. And of course, horses' mouths are not all the same shape. That can be quite problematic, and that they do see a lot of damage in the horse's mouth just from bits. And obviously, I mean, we all know that a bit can be
it can be beautifully
very mild,
used,
but the hands that hold the reins are also the things that are problematic. So we did look into an early recommendation, and it is interesting that the double bridle being mandated for Grand Prix for FEI competitions is the only sort of example of a piece of equipment that doesn't have safety sort of reasons, but it is mandated for use in a particular to a particular level. Now, I know that the dressage riders will have very good reason for that in their own minds in terms of their own horsemanship. But our job has been to look at this from the point of view of what we thought was in the best interest of the horse.
And that's something that could change pretty easily.
Well, we felt that it would be a fairly straightforward one, because it's not removing the ability to ride in a double bridle if that's
opening up
best for you and your horse. But it allows people who feel that it's in the best interest of their horse not to have two bits in their mouth to be able to do so in a competition.
South Africans were particularly interested to know, and I don't know if this is anything that you can answer, about the option of bitless competition in the future. Is that looking like something that could be on the cards in the FEI?
I mean, that is, it's obviously not our job to decide on what the sport wants and needs and how the sport's run, but from the point of view of making recommendations for the welfare of the horse, it would be something that we would consider. We've certainly had some very long and detailed information from the societies that are interested in the option of being able to ride without a bit. It's not something that we've discussed in great detail at the moment. Obviously, we've got quite a lot of work to do.
And I think very pressing. There are a lot of pressing issues that have to be given due diligence. You spoke about the 3 E's yesterday. 6 E's. Sorry, would you run through those with me quickly?
Oh, goodness. So obviously we're trying to consider ways that we can make recommendations, but then, be enabling. We're actually thinking about what sorts of things can be done to support the operationalising, if you like, of those particular recommendations. And so we came up with the 6 E's. We start with obviously making sure that we've got good evidence, so we can lay out what the evidence is for the whys of concern, but also what the recommendation is, and then right the way through education, how we engage through good communication, and what kind of communication, what does it need to look at, what does it need to address, and then right the way through to effective regulation. Is it effective? Could it be more effective? How do we enforce it? Is there evidence that it's not being well enforced? What needs to be done about that? And then who needs to be empowered to make that happen? So we've tried to come up with a structure. I mean, this is not unique. Strategic approaches have been looked at for many different sports and organisations. So we're sort of following a bit of a lead, but we're trying to make it something that's meaningful for the FEI.
I think particularly in the wake of the mounting criticism of horse sport, this is such a welcome pivot, I would say, in direction. But something you said to me yesterday, which I really loved, is we're going to go back to making the horse the subject of the sport, not the object of the sport. and I really enjoyed that. Is there anything else you would like to say to anyone?
No, I mean, I think the main thing I would say, because people, listen to this, and I know they listened to what we were saying yesterday and the day before, it's easy to target us, if you like, as the Commission, as being, not understanding or being the enemies. We would like people to see us as their critical friends. At the end of the day, we are also equestrian stakeholders. We all have horses. We all like to ride our horses. And we want to make sure that, not only are things always constantly being monitored and improved so that the horse is the centre of what we do and the horse's experience is positive, but also that we continue to have a mandate to be able to ride horses and enjoy them.
Absolutely. I think you're a conduit between the public and competition, and I think it's essential. It's so easy to see the comments under an FEI video and to go, these people are idiots, and don't know what they're talking about. It's unhelpful. We're in the face of mounting public pressure. We do have to find tactical mechanisms to make sure that the horses are happy and to educate the public in turn about the good work that we are doing.
Well, I mean, we have to. So, I mean, the surveys are actually available. All the reports are available on our new commission website. And you're going to ask me the address, and I can't remember it.
I think I have shared it, equinewellbeing.fei.org.
So, you can go to that. You can look up the surveys if you want to wade through, the reports. All the results are in there. And some of it won't surprise people, and some of it will. And I think it's important to face up to the fact that, we're not sort of just granted social license. We're not just, people have a right to have a comment about what we do. And if they don't like it, they'll be very strong in their comments. Social media is a platform for spreading it. Exactly.
Within days of that, there was a cry for all horse sports to come under a microscope. So we need to be careful.
So there is a big risk. And at the moment, I would say we're not on the tipping point, but we're not far off the tipping point, because we don't need, we need to be able to show that we're doing something, actively show that we're doing something, and that we continue to do something. And that will continue to at least give people the confidence that, we are listening to them and we are putting the horse first.
And we're trying to be better. I think that's all. As you said earlier on, there's constantly new evidence, and we've got to just be looking at how we can continually do better.
Just take it on board, be open to it, and recognise that we do have to move with the times.
Natalie, thank you so much for speaking to me this afternoon, and I'm going to leave you up to get back to your conference. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.